It's the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. For more on the Seminoles, including Osceola's coverage from veteran Seminole insiders, message boards, Osceola virtual happy hours, and more, go to theosceola.com. And right now, enter the code FSU20 and get 20% off your annual subscription. That's FSU20.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines podcast. My name is Patrick Burnham. I'm a football writer for the Osceola and the host of today's show. I'm joined today by Jerry Kutz, the owner and publisher of the Osceola, and our very special guest, former Georgia and Miami head coach, Mark Richt, who is also, of course, the longtime offensive coordinator for Bobby Bowden at Florida State. Coach Richt and Jerry are joining me today to talk about the FSU-Miami game coming up on Saturday night in Miami Gardens. Good morning, Coach Richt and Jerry. Thanks for joining us. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. Good to be here. Thank you.
Well, we got a lot to cover, but Coach, and I do want to talk about the fact that head coach Mike Norvell was diagnosed with COVID over the weekend and will miss the Miami game. But want to start with your overall thoughts on Florida's first game against Georgia Tech last week.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously there's a lot to talk about in any ball game. There's just so many facets to talk about. But, you know, one of the positives I want to bring up is the ability to block extra point and field goals. It's just it takes a lot of really good coaching and effort by your defenders. And normally if you block 3 kicks, you're going to win the game. So that was the good news. They blocked him. The bad news is they blocked him and still lost the ball game. But you got to give, you know, Coach Odell Hagen's a lot of credit for making those guys go hard. And, you know, I was on the other end of that myself at Miami my first year, coaching at Miami, and we're playing Florida State, and we're behind, and we drive down the field, and I think it was 17-10 or whatever the score was, but we're down by a touchdown. So we score on, I think it was on maybe a 4th down play, and it looks like we're going to tie the game up, getting ready to possibly go into overtime, and Florida State blocks the extra point, and that was it. That was game over. And you can win a lot of games by giving that kind of effort. So, you know, that was very impressive for them to do that. But to have those kicks blocked and still not come out with victory it had to be frustrating for everybody.
Yeah, well, it was a tightly contested game, and you're right. You would in those kind of games, you would think that the block kicks would come down to. Of course, now we had some other big plays that set Georgia Tech up, but certainly you would think that those plays in a kicking game will eventually pay off for Florida State in a close game later on this year. Coach, obviously the big news around Florida State broke on Saturday morning. Head coach Mike Norvell was diagnosed with COVID, and of course will be running the program remotely at least for the next 9 to 10 days. Can you talk to us a little bit how you would handle this situation as far as it pertains to running the program remotely and interactions with staff and players?
Right. Well, first of all, I hope Coach is okay. I hope everybody in his family's okay. You know, he looks young and healthy and strong, and, you know, more than likely, you know, he'll come out very healthy. The problem is, like you say, you know, how am I going to do my job remotely? How am I going to do my job without being able to physically be there? And, you know, the good news is there's a lot of technology that will allow him to stay in communication with his team and with his staff. And I can promise you, you know, everybody has team meetings, and that team meeting is in the team meeting room, and everybody has the ability to put somebody on the big screen and talk to the team. So I'm sure he's addressing the team. I'm sure he's already addressed the team and will continue to. A lot of teams will have a team meeting prior to every single practice. You might start with your team meeting, go to offense, defense, and then go to your segment meetings. And if that's their routine, it'll be very simple for coach to be able to talk to the team, you know, remotely every single day, and they'll probably set that up. I'm sure, you know, the night before the game, he'll have an opportunity to talk to the team maybe after the team meal before they break into offense, defense, and special teams again, or break into their individual segment meetings. And then he could obviously be in the middle of any of those segment meetings whether it's the quarterback meeting or maybe all your skill guys are together. So as far as meeting with the players, he'll be able to get FaceTime with them. He'll be able to do those Zooms and say whatever he needs to say. When it comes to staff, he could literally run a staff meeting virtually as well. Everybody can be in that staff meeting room. You got a big screen, and he can do a live Zoom meeting, be there and be able to listen to everything that's going on and be able to make comments on anything that's going on. Throughout the week, as you're trying to get your game plan together, your offensive staff will be in that room grinding out the film. And you might say, if it's the time to work on third downs, third medium, third long, you probably sit there more than likely separately and say, hey, we're going to meet back up in an hour and a half or something, and we're going to discuss the ideas that we saw. And sometimes that's actually valuable to have people in separate rooms working separately. So because a lot of times if you're all in there together, and especially if the head coach is in there, everybody tends to defer to the head coach and maybe doesn't bring up an idea or maybe agrees with what coach said. But if coach isn't there and everybody's throwing ideas around, when they do come together at the end of a certain time frame, then they can interact and say, what'd you see? What'd you like? Okay, I get it. Or I'll go back and watch the tape and and try to, confirm or deny whether you like something or not. And then, when it comes to game planning, as far as putting things on a game plan sheet or a call sheet, you're going to put down, hey, what do we like 3rd and 1 and 2? What do we like 3rd and medium? What do we like 3rd and long? What do we like in the red zone? What do we like just 1st and 2nd down in the green zone, 20 to 20? And then, what do I like in a 2-minute drill? So that call sheet is going to have every situation you could possibly have, and the favorite things you want to call, run or pass in a certain down or distance or situation, that whoever does call the plays is going to have a great guide as to what to call. There'll be the favorite calls. There'll be when 3rd down pops up, if it's 3rd medium, go to your call sheet. This is the number 1 pass we said we're going to call. This is the number 1 run we said we're going to call. So a lot of times you're just using the call sheet from all the information you gathered throughout the week, and then you're going to get a chance to use that to call the game.
Now, obviously, this is a very bizarre situation. I know head coaches have missed games before in the past. It's relatively unseen. Does the fact that they have been holding meetings virtually throughout the spring and summer and early part of the fall, does that make this a little bit easier to deal with? Or obviously he's going to be missing from the practice field, but as far as the meetings are concerned, does that help them at all?
Well, I think it helps a lot. The kids are used to those kind of things, especially with the COVID. There's no doubt about that. And let's face it, the head coaching position is not a one-man job. I mean, you hire coordinators, you hire position coaches, you hire, graduate assistants, and you got doctors and trainers, and, you have all these people that can help you do your job. And if everybody's doing their job right, you've done a good job as a head coach. If you could walk away and say, hey, you guys got it this week, then you've done a good job of preparing your staff. So I think the kids will be used to it. I think the coaches will be used to it. I think Coach Norvell will have as much input as he wants to have, as he chooses to have. I'm sure, I don't know what would happen. I doubt game day he's in communication with somebody up in the booth, but I don't know if that'd be allowable or not. But
it's not allowable from how I understand it.
Yeah, I would think he would not be. And quite frankly, if whoever's calling the plays probably doesn't need somebody in his ear all the time. He needs to be able to focus and call that game.
Well, Coach, let me ask you this. Coach Norvell has always been the primary play caller where he's been the head coach. and he's always obviously had a lot of input on the game planning and what they're going to do against the defense. Because he's not going to be at the game physically to call the plays and be involved in down-to-down adjustments and series adjustments, how will that limit his impact on the game plan, or how would you approach that if you knew you were going to be in that same position?
Again, the call sheet's going to have every situation that'll come up in a ball game. And that call sheet has, again, been decided on throughout the week of film study and brainstorming and saying, yes, this is what we like. Okay, now, if things go as planned, it's pretty easy to call the game. If things don't go as planned, or, all of a sudden you got to make adjustments, then it's tough. It's tougher to call a game like that. But, that's the art of calling plays. So, when it comes to who do you let call the plays, it's got to be. I don't know who's there that well. I don't know their skill sets, but I do know that you want to have somebody that has a big picture outlook on a game. In other words, does he understand the running game? Does he understand the passing game? Does he understand defenses and what they like to do? I think the fact that this was found out early enough, whoever is going to call the game has time to get his mind right and ready to go. If this happened midweek or something, it'd have been a lot tougher to just say, oh, by the way, you got to call this game and be ready in 2 days, 3 days. It'd have been tough, or at least tougher than it is now. But you got to put a guy in there. Like I had John Lilly call a game or two when I couldn't do it. And Coach Lilly, or like if I had a coordinator leave on me, and Coach Lilly was coaching tight ends at Georgia. I know he called a bowl game, but he understood, being the tight ends coach, he understood the running game, the blocking schemes, pass protections, route running. And he had a pretty good feel even what quarterback reads were, playing quarterback back when he was a player. So, he was a natural for that moment and did a good job.
Well, Coach, let me ask you this. Obviously, day-to-day responsibilities until Coach Norvell gets back has been handed to tight ends coach Chris Thompson, his deputy head coach. How important is it on the day-to-day operations and also on game day to have a coach on your staff who's been in a head coach's shoes? He was a head coach for 7 years at Abilene Christian and has spent time at Texas Tech, Arizona State, and TCU. Is by far the most veteran coach on the offensive side of the ball. How valuable is that to Mike Norvell?
Well, it's big. First of all, you're not going to hire him unless you trust him. And the fact that he's been in the, behind the desk making those kind of decisions before is big. And then, all the coaches have got to do a good job of buying into that leadership once that's been established. We all know Odell Haggins can do it. He's done it before. And he certainly is a guy that is a glue guy. He's always been a guy that's, part of the solution and not part of the problem. So it's going to take every staff member to say, hey, this is what we're dealing with. This coach is taking over the lead role, and we're going to follow his lead. But we're also going to be there to, help him out. My best help was, brave enough to say, hey, Coach, don't you think we ought to do this, or you ought to consider that? You don't want everybody just to agree with you every time you, open your mouth. But there is, you need some type of hierarchy so you have order, and that's the way Coach Norvell has decided to go. So everybody's got to buy in.
Yeah, you'd have to think that Coach Norvell obviously is very disappointed by this. He takes a job at Florida State and is going to miss his first Miami-Florida State game. That's got to be very disappointing to him. Could you imagine taking over at Miami, then your first Miami-Florida State game you missed? How strange would that be?
Yeah, it'd be strange for sure. And, there's been a lot of things that have gone on since he's taken the job that have been challenges. And we'll, help him grow as a coach. I think he already is an outstanding coach. But, there is no one way to do things. And life, you never know what life's going to throw at you. So there's not a book on what do I do if COVID happened. There's not a book that says, what do I do if I get COVID and can't coach a game? You got to do a lot of things on the fly, but Again, I think he's hired a staff that he knows and trusts, and I think he'll be able to communicate enough of his message to the team and staff and his game planning abilities that, it may not be as big of a deal as you think.
Yeah, well, 2020 has certainly had all of us adjusting from the normal, what we thought was normal coming into the year. But and certainly it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next 7 days. Coach, obviously want to get into your impressions of Miami. They had a big victory over Louisville on Saturday night. They have 2 games in the books. What have you seen from Miami that you like and over the first 2 games of the year?
Well, game 1 offensively, they were still, feeling their way around a little bit. I think Derek King played well, but he was more dangerous as a runner than a passer that particular game. The deep ball accuracy wasn't what you'd want, but the second game, they really played well offensively, and Red Lashley put together a beautiful game plan, got him a couple what turned out to be easy touchdowns. I mean, 2 back-to-back 75-yard touchdown plays. We just kind of broke the will of Louisville. And Louisville was answering, but they were, going 11, 12-play drives, trying to get points on the board for 14 points. Two long drives, and you had to earn every inch. And then Miami, throws the pass and hands the ball off and goes the distance in just a matter of seconds. So I thought Coach Lashley and Derek King's ability to get on the same page with each other from one week to the next was really good. They began to use, their tight end, Brevin Jordan, who, I think may be the very best in the country. And Will Mallory caught a touchdown pass, the other tight end. He's a lot more talented than people know, because he just hadn't got that many reps in games or that many opportunities. But he's a baller. They got other receivers with speed. They got, Cam Harris has really done well holding off these freshman running backs, Chaney and Knighton, and those guys are the real deal. The offensive line is blocking much better than they have than they had in the last few years. Derek had time to hold the ball. They were running the ball well. The first game, 320-some yards rushing. And you got to be blocking pretty good. I don't care who you're playing. So things are really coming together offensively and defensively. They've always been pretty darn good. And Coach Diaz did a super job of getting in that transfer portal and getting Derek King, but getting Quincy Roach and Jalen Phillips, 2 defensive ends that were really talented guys that when you lost Greg Rousseau, you thought the sky was falling at defensive end position, but they already had some people in place. I mean, I think Coach Diaz has just done a wonderful job in the offseason, making some changes staff-wise, recruiting in general, getting in that transfer portal and plucking some gems. They really are a different team today than they were last year, for sure, and even from game 1 to game 2. They really made a big leap, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the kicker looks like he's going to be a weapon too.
Well, that was biting them in the rear. The kicking, the extra point field goals, was get your young guy getting the yips, and all of a sudden you got Borregales, who's a stud. I mean, if you watched him kick it, the ball got up quick, the ball was down the pipe, and he could probably nail one from 70 if he wanted to.
And somehow this game always comes down to a field goal too. So,
oh yeah,
but the vast majority of the time. So that could be interesting to see how it plays out. All right, Coach. Moving on to FSU. If you're going into your staff meeting on Sunday or Monday, how are you telling your defense or what are you asking your coaches about how to defend Derek King defensively, and what does FSU have to do to be successful on defense and put itself in a position to win?
Right. Well, you got more problems now after game 2 than you might have thought you had after game 1. In other words, who are they getting the ball to? Well, they got it to their tight ends, they got it to their running backs, they got it to their receivers. Mark Pope and D. Wiggins and Mike Harley, are doing good at the receiver position. I mentioned the tight ends, the running backs. So usually you're like, how do I defend this team? What do they like to do the best? Well, they got one game they run for 300 yards, and now they got another game they pass for 300 yards. And the quarterback is as good a runner as anybody on the field. And that's talking a big order there with the skill that they have at running back. So, I mean, you got to do a good job of getting pressure with your front four, in my opinion. If you start pressuring too much, this is a veteran quarterback, the ball is going to come out. And then you got a bunch of one-on-one situations that you might not want to deal with. And if you play a ton of man coverage and you got DBs chasing receivers and the quarterback, has the ability to tuck it and run, that's a dangerous thing. So, whether it's Derek King or any quarterback who could kill you with his legs as much as his arms, you got to first do your very best to stop the running game, period. And then, get to the point where you can get pressure with the least amount of rushers so you got some people in coverage. But that's going to be a tall order.
How hard would it be to play a bunch of man coverage against him, Coach, given his ability to take off and run?
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. You got everybody's running. If you get 5 receivers running routes, you got 5 defenders chasing. You could leave one guy deep. He's a zone guy. Maybe one guy in the low hole is a linebacker, the robber coverages that people play to kind of spy the quarterback. But even those guys, the first guy is going to have a heck of a time trying to tackle this kid out in space. And that's what happens. You get a pass rush where your rush is kind of spread thin. You got everybody chasing eligible receivers, and you got maybe one guy who's spying on the quarterback, but there's still a lot of grass in between him and the quarterback when he takes off. It's going to be hard to get him on the ground. So I'd be a little worried about doing too much of that. That's for sure.
All right, Coach, moving over to the FSU offense. Obviously, Miami's got some talented defensive players, very athletic, but lost some key returners, or key guys from last year, particularly Quarterman and Pinckney up front, and then, as you mentioned, Rousseau up on the defensive front. But I meant obviously Quarterman and Pinckney at linebacker.
Right.
FSU was not able to run the ball as effectively as they wanted to against Georgia Tech. It was inconsistent in the pass game. What can FSU do against Miami to help them be successful in offense and, again, put themselves in a position to win the ball game?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not like I'm going to give somebody the game plan. They know what they're doing. The things are pretty obvious that you'd say to any coach to any game, and that is, you got to at least attempt to run the ball. If you get into a game where all you're doing is trying to pass it down after down and get yourself in third and long situations, it's going to be a bad day. I mean, you got to find ways to reduce the yardage on first and second down where third down is manageable. I like always looking for a shot play or a way to, take the ball downfield and, let your receivers go up and do battle with some one-on-ones out there. Those 50-50 balls people talk about. You have to throw a few of those, but you got to get the ball in play where these guys like Tamari and Terry can go make a play. But I know I'd be trying to find a lot of ways to get it to him. That's for sure.
Hey, Coach, let me ask you a question. I just thought about this. All right, so your head coach is not going to be at this game. It's your first game on the road. You did not play either one of your true freshman quarterbacks in your home opener, one because of injury, other one we're not quite sure of in Tate Rodemaker. Is there as a head coach who's not going to be there, how comfortable would you be throwing in a true freshman quarterback his first game and you're not there on the field?
Yeah, it'd be a tough call to do. You gotta worry about if you get your starter in position where he's comfortable, he's kicking butt, everybody believes in him, the offense is, clicking on all cylinders, sometimes there's a time for a series here and there that you'd let a young quarterback get in the game and play, knowing the specific plays that he would run so he can not have to worry about the entire game plan and just the plan of when he's in the game. But you take a risk when you do that because freshmen make mistakes in big games. And in a game like this, I'm not going to do any experimenting at the quarterback position in a game like this.
So that would, as far as you're concerned, that would be, hey, you're our only healthy quarterback. We got to get you in the ball game type of thing. All right, I understand that. All right, Coach. Now, I do want to you have a very storied history. You've played at the University of Miami. You've coached at the University of Miami, and of course, for the FSU's longtime offensive coordinator during the Dynasty era. Kind of share some of your favorite memories of the FSU-Miami rivalry, and I'd love for you to start what you remember about the game as a player.
Well, as a player, I only played in one game that I can remember, and I think it was Alfonso Carricker, if I'm not mistaken. Whoever he was, there was a fire-breathing dragon on defense that I don't even remember how many times I got sacked and knocked down in that ball game, which we lost. It was not a pretty day for sure. It was not a lot of fun. But I remember after the game, Coach Bowden putting his arm around me and hugging my neck and consoling me after a butt whipping. But that's the only thing I can remember about it as a player.
Now, was that the first time you'd ever talked to Coach Bowden or had any interaction with him, or had you guys talked on the recruiting trail when you were a prospect?
Yeah, I actually took an official visit to Florida State, and Wally Woodham and Jimmy Jordan were there at the time, and only maybe a couple years ahead of me, so I was like running away from that situation, which wasn't very smart. But so I ended up hanging around with Jim Kelly for all those 5 years at Miami, backing him up. But I got a chance to meet him during the recruiting process, got a chance to meet him, when the head coach has a meeting with all the prospects that are there on the official visit. So I got to know him a little bit through recruiting, and I'm sure he remembered those days too.
All right, Coach, after you left Miami, you came to Florida State as a graduate assistant and spent a long time here as offensive coordinator. Can you kind of tell us some of your favorite memories as a coach at Florida State against the Canes?
Yeah, any game we won. There were some – I don't know why we remember the heartbreaks more than the victories. But, some of those wide rights, and there might have been a wide left in there too, I don't know. Some tough games, and also remember a time I think we went for two and didn't get the 2-point play at the end of the game, trying to throw the ball to Pat Carter, if I'm not mistaken. But
yep.
But Charlie Ward, his senior year, we beat him up pretty good that day, and wasn't that tight of a score at the end. That was probably my favorite one.
All right, Coach. Now, you're on the ACC Network now, but you have a long history with Florida State and obviously a long history with Miami. Do you find yourself torn on game day when this game comes around, or are you decidedly orange and green or garnet and gold? Right.
Well, right now I've recruited a lot of those kids at Miami, and I want to see those guys succeed. You kind of cheer for people in this business more than teams sometimes when you have relationships, and got a lot of relationships with Coach Diaz and some of the coaches on the staff, and then also the players that I had a chance to recruit and get to know and love. So truthfully, I'll be cheering for the Canes for at least the players that I know to do well, but I'm just looking for a good game like everybody else.
Well, yeah, I think we all are. And, Coach, I do have one other question for you, and it's not a very serious question. But one of the things that came to be while you were at Miami was this thing called the turnover chain.
Right.
How did that come about, and why did it come about?
Yeah, that was – well, you're trying to encourage turnovers. I mean, on defense, takeaways is probably the number one stat. And so, people would have around the country their little motivational things. And so the defensive staff was working on an idea of what could be motivational for our guys to get a turnover. And, in their defense, Coach Diaz was running the defense at the time, and they decided it had to be Miami-ish and, gold chain and diamonds and glitter and, all the jewels and all that kind of thing. They wanted to have some flash and some swag to it. Well, I think it was game day, if I'm not mistaken. It was game day or the day before. Coach Diaz comes to me and says, "Oh, Coach, by the way, we got this turnover chain in case we get a turnover. We want to be able to pull it out and let the kid wear it and all that kind of thing, if that's okay with you." And I'm like, "Well, it's pretty far down the road." And he goes, "Coach, I got to admit it's pretty gaudy." And I said, "Well, I wouldn't expect anything different." So they sprung it on me at the end, the defensive staff, and it turned out to be, a raging success, to say the least.
Yeah, I think you could buy a small island for what you guys paid for that thing, and it seems to only be getting bigger every year. Now, obviously, they have the touchdown rings on offense. Would that start when you were the head coach?
Well, no, it happened after the fact.
Okay.
There were some guys on offense that were jealous. That the defense was having all the fun, so they decided to get the touchdown rings. And I'll go back to that turnover chain just for a second, but, defense would get a turnover. We'd be at home, and then the offense would get on the field, getting ready to run the plays, and then our PA people or announcers or whoever's running the scoreboard would flash the player wearing the turnover chain and all the defensive players jumping around him right when we're trying to run a play. And so our own crowd was drowning out our cadence. We had to go to nonverbal communication at home after a turnover because we couldn't hear each other think. But that was a lot of fun. It was worth it.
Hey, Coach, this is Jerry. Question about that. A lot of our fans don't really understand that, the older guys, older people. Why is things like that important to a team and morale and players?
Yeah.
Is it important or is it?
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, ever since the turnover chain got incorporated, I think Miami's top 5 in America in turnovers. I mean, it's tremendous motivation. I mean, if you just watch the sideline reaction, they're having fun. It creates energy. It creates, team. I mean, it's just, I think it's not anything. And the thing I like about it too is it's not putting something in somebody's face. You're not taking the turnover chain and putting it in the face of the other team or something like that. You're putting it on. Your teammates are cheering for you and getting excited. And offense always gets excited when they get a turnover and get a chance to get the ball back. So I just think it's a lot of fun, and it certainly reflects the Miami vibe, so to speak. So I think it's perfect. I think most people are jealous. Most people are jealous they didn't think of it, is what I think.
Well, yeah, that might have something to do with it. All right, Coach. Well, obviously you're an ACC Network analyst. Kind of give us your overall thoughts on the ACC after 2 weeks of conference play, and has there been any teams that have surprised you one way or the other?
Well, the teams that look great are Clemson, obviously. Notre Dame looked really good in their 2 outings, especially the second outing. Miami, just talking about them, they look like they may have all the ingredients they need to make a run at this thing. Louisville was a team that, I felt like could make a run at it as well, and they're still a dangerous team on any given day. One of the surprises, North Carolina, I think, is a good team. We'll find out. Hadn't seen much of them. Hadn't seen Virginia Tech. Hadn't seen Virginia. But the one team that looked surprisingly good was Boston College. I thought they looked really zippered up at all offense, defense, and special teams. And this quarterback, I think, is the real deal. There's some teams that, the tier 2 teams, if you want to call them, maybe closer to tier 1 with Clemson. then you think there'll probably be a few battles throughout the season that Clemson's going to have to deal with. But I love the fact that there's just a lot of great quarterbacks in the league, or at least very competent quarterbacks. Not many, youngsters in there. And the one youngster in Jeff Sims at Georgia Tech has proven to be a pretty good youngster. I thought Georgia Tech, I really like what Coach is doing. I think people got to watch out for Tech because they're in Atlanta. There's an unbelievable recruiting base. They now have a system that they can recruit to, and they got some really solid leadership in Coach Collins. So they're going to be a problem for people in the future too.
Yeah, that freshman running back looked really good against UCF too.
Yes, sir. He's a good one.
I think he's going to be a difference maker for them. Coach, obviously some national news. I'd like to get your feedback on. The Big Ten announced they're coming back. Just your thoughts on what that does for college football, and do you think the Pac-12 will eventually decide to come back?
Right. Well, I think the Big Ten, they're afraid they're going to miss out on all the fun and realize that we could do this and do it safely, or at least as safely as if they weren't playing. I mean, the bottom line is football is a sport that has risk, whether there's COVID or not. But, there's going to be COVID whether there's football or not. So I think having your players around you, being tested, being taken care of, being talked to about how to behave responsibly when it comes to this thing, I think they did a good job of getting in just in time. I think they did a good job of timing up their season to end in time to make it make sense for the college football playoff without asking the rest of the Power 5 teams to wait for them. So I think they did it just in the nick of time, and I think it's good. Pac-10, I think the ship has sailed. I don't think they could get in the college football playoff, even if they decide to play later in the year. They may have an exhibition season that some people may care about, but when there's not a championship on the line, it's going to be tough. And I'll say this: the states that they are in are making it very, very difficult to play games and say, we can have a successful bubble here or whatever it is. So, I mean, they're dealing with some things that other conferences aren't dealing with.
Coach, I got one other national item I want to ask you about, but especially as it affects FSU, and I believe it might have been to me, this was bigger than the loss to Georgia Tech, and I may be wrong. But, the NCAA has come out and extended the recruiting dead period through December 31st, which means Florida State and Mike Norvell, at his first-year program, cannot have kids on campus. Now they can't give coaches tickets to high school coaches. How big an impact is that on a first-year program, and am I overstating its importance?
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Most kids that are being recruited have been recruited since the 8th or 9th or 10th grade by the programs that have been intact and the staffs that have been intact. So I think it will be a competitive disadvantage for any first-year head coach. But, there's not a lot you can do about it. That's one of those things where you can't cry about it. You just got to find ways to communicate, and it may be a lot more virtual stuff, and that may be all you need. But the best product they can put on the field is going to be their best recruiting tool. So the more improvement that people see throughout the year, the more faith and confidence they'll have that, Coach Norvell and his staff can get it done.
All right. Well, Coach, I'm not going to ask you to make a prediction on this game. I don't even know that you can as an ACC analyst. But I do want to ask you, if we are waking up in Tallahassee on Sunday morning and FSU has won the ball game, what do you think is the key to that victory for FSU? What must happen for FSU to win the ball game?
I think there's going to have to be some more block kicks and win that turnover ratio. I think Miami is a team that's going to be really difficult to beat right now. And I think there's going to have to be some things to go Florida State's way besides just lining up and whipping their tail. I think they got to get some fortuitous bounces, so to speak, some tip balls and interceptions. I think they got to have some things where the ball bounces a certain way that bounces their way, because right now I think Miami is a superior team.
Coach, you've coached this series a number of times. It seems to me that this is a game where you get the best out of your players. The players seem to always get up for Florida State and vice versa for Miami. Did you find that to be true?
Yeah, there's no doubt. You don't have to do much talking or motivating, even throughout the week at practice. There's a lot of energy around this game. We know those kids know each other. Those programs have had the storied history with each other, even pregame speeches and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to say much. And usually you got to maybe even tone it down a little bit to calm them down and not have them waste too much energy in that locker room before you kick it off, because you got your pregame warm-up, and it's okay to have a little juice in that thing. But then you go back to that locker room for 12 to 15 minutes, whatever it is, and you could waste a lot of energy there waiting to get back on the field again. So you got to keep them calm, keep them hydrated, and they'll strike when the time comes. Both teams will do that, and both teams will be ready emotionally for this game for sure.
Hey, Coach, one last question as it pertains to that. This has traditionally been a very most of these games are very close. You don't have a lot that are blowouts. We've had a few and far between in the past. Now, I think they're going to probably adjust this, but the line for the game opened up was Miami as a 10.5-point favorite. Is that too much in this rivalry, and do you think how much improvement do you think we'll see from Florida State from game 1 to game 2?
Right. Well, everybody's basing their decisions off of what they've seen to this point. And, that number doesn't seem too crazy. I'm not a gambler. I don't get into it at all. The only experience I have with gambling is the gamblers who would call and be mad if I took a knee at the end of a game and didn't score one more touchdown when I could have. And I didn't even know what the point spread was when I was calling plays. So, I'd get people mad at me because I was just oblivious to what was going on in that area. But it doesn't seem like a big number to me considering what I've seen so far.
Okay. All right. Well, it is definitely going to be – and the only reason I ask is because obviously Vegas can afford those bright lights on all night, day and night. So, they got to be right more than they're wrong. I just thought it was a little high given the fact that this is a rivalry. So just wanted to ask you that question. But, Coach, it's going to be an interesting night on Saturday night in Miami Gardens. And, of course, I want to thank you for your time and for joining us again. And, of course, we would love to have you back anytime you want to come back on with us.
All right. I had fun. I hope we have a great game. We'll see you.
All right, Coach. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
This has been another edition of the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. To subscribe to the Osceola, go to theosceola.com. And right now, enter the code FSU20 and get 20% off your annual subscription. That's FSU20. Go Noles!